Today on the Transplant Helper, dealing with depression, we're going to be discussing both the signs as well as particularly some of the solutions you can use that are very practical that just might help you out if you're dealing with some form of anxiety and or depression. Stay tuned. Well, hey folks, I appreciate you joining me today on the Transplant Helper podcast / YouTube video series. My name is Jim Merle. Let me go ahead and ask you, if you've not already subscribed to this channel, how about go ahead and do that right now? Just click that little subscribe button right beneath the video, and I'll continue to promise to provide you with content which advocates, educates, and hopefully can even motivate you as a transplant patient. Now, today's topic of discussion, very simply stated, is dealing with depression. Now, you may not deal with depression at all. I admit that there are a great number of us who do not, but the truth is that there are many of Americans who deal with depression every day, and it can be very debilitating on the one extreme, or just be something that's kind of an annoyance on the other. And so we want to discuss that today and hopefully give both the signs of depression as well as some great solutions that are very practical that can help you, if you're dealing with that, to go throughout your daily life. And as I always say toward the end of the program, I'll say right now, to kind of stay stronger, if you will. But with that said, let me say this in the onset. I made a Facebook post the other day in one of my heart transplant support groups and such, and asked the question, do you deal with depression, or have you dealt with depression either pre or post transplant? Now, I knew when I posted that I was probably not going to get the typical feedback, and that is typically when I post something on one of those Facebook groups, no matter what it is, if it's heart related or transplant related, I get a lot of feedback. But I knew when I posted that I was likely not to get very much feedback at all. Now, the feedback I got was great, and if you gave feedback on that, thank you so much. But I also understand that because of the stigma, because of the embarrassment, because of the misunderstandings oftentimes that go along with depression and anxiety and other kind of mental disorders, that there were not going to be that many people who are willing to go public and make comment about that. And that's okay. I appreciate that. I understand that. But nevertheless, I just knew that was going to be the case. Let's jump right in. I'll try to pop some things up on the screen if we need to in just a few moments. But basically, when it comes to the signs of depression, most of what you might research on the internet is kind of going to be along the same veins. That is, the signs of depression are kind of going to be about the same. The symptoms are going to be about the same. Basically, a feeling of being sad, anxious, or feeling empty, feelings of hopelessness, worthlessness, being pessimistic about everything, feeling guilty. Sometimes goes along with that, not enjoying things that we used to enjoy, and I know I fell in that category, still fall in that category sometimes. Trouble with concentration, memory, making decisions, trouble sleeping, and whether it be that we're not able to sleep or maybe we sleep too much, appetite changes, weight gain, feeling irritable, outbursts of anger, thoughts of suicide, death. Those sorts of things are kind of the basics of what you're generally going to find are supposedly the signs or the symptoms of depression. Now, you don't have to meet all of those criteria. You don't have to be in all of those categories to be defined as or to be diagnosed as being depressed or clinically depressed. As a matter of fact, basically what doctors will tell you is if you fall in between 4 to 5 of those categories and you have that to deal with on a persistent and daily basis, and by the way, we'll mention that again in a moment, that's a key, persistent and daily basis, then you could actually be diagnosed with a form of depression. Now, why do I say consistent and daily basis? Because these things are not just a matter of being, tired one day or feeling sad one day or being unhappy or, kind of having a memory slip. It's not something that happens just once and it's gone, or a couple of times and it's gone. This is something that's persistent. It's ongoing, and they typically like to look at it and say, has this been going on for weeks or months? And unfortunately for some people, it goes on for years undiagnosed and misunderstood. And so meeting some of these criteria, and I'll try to pop a list similar to that up on the screen right now, and you can be looking at it while I'm talking, but You can look across this list, not exactly what I just described, because what I said from memory, but looking across this list, do you meet any of these criteria? And if so, do you meet them on a regular, consistent, and persistent basis? That's for you to judge. You have to decide that for yourself. And I'm going to pull that back down right now. Let's move on from that. That's the basic signs of depression. I'm going to link some videos in the corners as well as in the description below that hopefully will help you to understand that, because I'm not a medical doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist, so I can't necessarily diagnose that for you. But what can you do as far as solutions go? I'm a solutions guy. I'm a guy who likes to help, who likes to advocate, educate, motivate you as a transplant patient, or in any case, in this case. What are some of the solutions, things that we need to do in order to battle off, fight off, ward off depression if we feel like that's what's going on in our lives? And I'm going to make these things practical, hopefully easy to remember just by the way that I say them, and maybe this will be of some help to you. Number one, in order to battle off or fight off depression, we need to step out. Step out. You say, what do you mean by that? Well, by stepping out, that's just my catchier way of saying it. What I mean by that is get some exercise. Get out and do something. Go for a walk. Go for a jog. Go for a run. Go to your local gym. Go to for many of us, to the transplant rehab facility and get some exercise. Now, there's a medical sense where this is absolutely true. To get exercise releases neurotransmitters, releases endorphins, they're called, those sorts of chemicals in your brain that actually can help to balance the scales, if you will, between being depressed or not. And so consistent exercise really makes a difference in that. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that or not, but I promise you, I've had days where I didn't feel like doing anything, didn't have any interest in anything, just didn't care. And then, ended up accidentally almost going for a walk, maybe needing to go to the grocery store. And by the time I walked through the store, zigzagging up the aisles, getting that exercise, felt a little bit better. And so when you start to connect those dots, then it starts to become okay to actually purposefully exercise. And I've done programs before about my exercise program and what it boils down to. I'll link that up here in the corner now too, as well as down below. But getting exercise, that's important. Now, one thing that also does for you is exercising, especially for us as post-transplant patients, I know builds confidence. That is, we've got our new organs, we've got our new lease on life, we've got our new opportunities before us, and we've kind of got to build some confidence. What are we capable of? What are we able to do now? How are we going to be able to survive this life? And by exercising, we begin to see some of those successes, if you will, playing out. We can get excited about. I know I did shortly after transplant. I had a very successful transplant as far as the first part of the recovery. And I could remember when I first accomplished that mile-long walk, and I could do 3 or 4 within a few weeks, but when I could first make that first mile, that within itself was a mood changer for me. And that's before I even thought about depression, but I just knew things were hard and I needed some help. So first of all, in the very first one here, stepping out, that is exercise. Number 2, get out. You say, well, that sounds the same. Stepping out, get out. Well, it's not exactly the same. Getting out means to get outside. You see, you may exercise indoors. You may exercise by walking up down your own hallway in your house or something, or, around the floor in a hospital. But getting out, getting exposure, particularly to the sun, is huge in handling, dealing with, preventing, warding off even depression. Now, again, there are many, many reasons why medically this is the case. One of the reasons is that when you are exposed to sunlight, not just indoor light, that's not strong enough, but to sunlight, you get a vast majority of the vitamin D, which is an important vitamin that you need in your life. You get the vast majority of the vitamin D in your life pretty quickly. Usually within about 20 minutes of full sun exposure, you can get all the vitamin D you need for the entire day. Someone says, well, wait a minute. I know about vitamin D. I grew up with my mom and daddy, or my mama or my grandmother, pushing red cap milk, as I call it. It's whole milk, by the way. We call it red cap here in Alabama, but pushing red cap milk on me. And I was told on the commercials during the cartoons on Saturday that gave me vitamin D and made my bones strong and I built muscles. That's all true, and it has a lot to do, vitamin D does, with your immune system, with your muscles, with your bone density and all. That's wonderful and great. And as it does that, however, milk, and this is not what most people want to admit, milk is not actually the best source. The best source is the sun. 40% of Americans today are vitamin D deficient, and they would not be if they just stepped outside. Now, about 20 minutes a day will get you your entire fill of it. 10 minutes a day will make things better. Go drink your milk, go get it from another source, and there you go. You're good to go. And so one of the ways you can do that is certainly to not only to step out, but to get outside and get in the sun. Again, I've experienced this days when I just didn't feel that great, going outside. And we live in the country, and I appreciate that. You may have city life, and you may like that too, but I like the country life. I can go outside, and sometimes I'll just take, one of the chairs off the porch and drag it right out into the broad daylight, beaming, boiling sun, and just sit there knowing what I'm experiencing then. So getting out is important. Number next, pass out. Pass out. You say, wait a minute now. Pre-transplant, I had some episodes where I passed out. I got dizzy, lightheaded, and I fell out. I'm not talking about that. By passing out, I'm playing on words to say, get some sleep. Get some sleep. And again, one of the biggest triggers, if you will, of clinical depression even is that we're not getting enough rest. We're not getting enough sleep. Our bodies are not recovering, both physically and even emotionally and mentally. Our bodies are not recovering because they're not getting enough rest. Now, depending on your age and all those factors, some people say, well, you don't need as much sleep when you get to this certain age. Hey, it would do anyone good to get 7 or 8 hours sleep a night if that's possible. Now, I'm an insomniac, if that's the word. I have difficulty sleeping. I actually take medications every night to help me to fall asleep. But there's so much we can do to help along with that I'm not good at, such as turning off the cell phone, turning off the TV, dimming the lights an hour or two before bed. There's a lot, and you can do your research on that. Click some YouTube videos and find it for yourself. It's all there. We've got to get away from blue light exposure to rest. We've got to get our mental clock set by going to sleep, not exactly when it gets dark outside, but that's what the triggers are. Actually getting dark outside is what's supposed to be triggering in your mind the ability to go to sleep. Waking up by the same when the sun rises can help with getting back to sleep that night. That exercise you may be doing during the day, getting yourself wore out and tired, all can help. But we need to pass out, and that has a lot to do. We're already fatigued, and we're already tired, and we're already wore out from not getting rest. It's just going to get that much worse if we're dealing with depression. So step out, get out, pass out. Now, here's the next one. Sounds similar again, but go out. And by go out, I mean find a friend. Find a friend. Now, listen to this statistic closely. More than 50% of Americans admit to not having a close friend. 50% of Americans admit to not having a close friend. 60% of Americans, at one point in time, a statistic I once knew of, 60% of Americans admit to feeling lonely most of the time. You take those two numbers, and I'm making up a statistic here. That's my disclaimer. I'm making up the next statistic. But if 50% of Americans do not have a close friend, 60% of Americans admit to feeling lonely most of the time, what do you think we as transplant patients fall? Being a transplant patient at times, now I'm not saying we don't have wonderful friends and family and all that, but being a transplantation at times kind of sets you apart from the gang, doesn't it? Pre-transplant especially, when you're not able to get out and go out and do all these things that maybe you once did with your friends and family, it doesn't take very long, and you're at the house and they're having all the fun, and that can lead to your mood coming down, and getting worse and worse, and maybe even falling into depression. Now, let me tell you how this one works for me. This kind of rolls back into the getting out, the stepping out, the passing out, all this together. This one here, going out. Here's a discovery I made a few years ago. My wife helped me to understand this, and when she finally showed it to me, if that's the right word, revealed it to me, I'll use a fancier word, she was right. I can remember many a day, pre and post transplant, not knowing what was going on necessarily, but laying on the couch, getting up in the mornings, saying, oh, I feel terrible, I'm tired, I'm wore out, I don't feel good, whatever. And sometimes that was physical, no doubt, but laying out on the couch and saying, I don't feel like doing anything today, so I'm not. And then here's what would happen. The phone would ring, or a friend, and I've got one of my good friends, he's such a good friend, he kind of just barges in the door, and that's okay. But the phone would ring, or a friend, a buddy would show up and say, hey, come on, let's go do so-and-so. Let's go here. Let's go there. Let's go over here and do this. It was amazing how quick I could be transformed from, I don't have any energy, I can't do anything today, to, okay, let's go. And the mood swing was tremendous. And my wife would point it out, you're laying all over the couch and all of a sudden you feel like going and doing this. And so going out, finding that close friendship, someone you can reach out to, or for that matter, let me give you a secret. You can reach out to someone else and be that friend. You can be the encourager, telling someone, calling on someone, let's go do something. Let's not sit around here. No reason to sit around here and be depressed. So here's the next one here. Not only going out, but looking out. Looking out. Now, why do I use the words or terms looking out? Sometimes you and I have to look for things to do. As it's always been said, kind of cliche, an idle mind is the devil's workshop. More times than not all the time now, but many times my depressive moods fall in when I just don't have anything else to do. I mean, what do you have to do but sit around and think? What do you have to do but lay around and mope in your troubles? But look out for things to do. Now, whether you do that in a group or whether you do that solo, find an activity, find a hobby, find something you enjoy doing. If it's as simple as, and I don't think it's the best solution, but surfing the internet and watching TV is better than just staring into space. Get involved in something. Get involved in some of these Facebook groups I'm talking about, some of these transplant groups. Look up the word transplant on Facebook or on Twitter. Look at the hashtag transplant. You'll find people that are in your same, deal with the same things you do. That'll give you a way to get active, to do something. I don't know what your hobbies might be. If you go fishing, go fishing. You go hunting, go hunting. You twiddle your thumbs for a living, do that. Just find a way to look out. And here's the last one here. Reach out. Reach out. This is a big one right here. That is, reach out for someone else to help. We can get to a place, at least I've been in that place, where we begin to feel like our lives are worse than anyone else. Our lives are more terrible than the life that anyone else lives, and that's simply not the case. Reach out, find someone who needs help, consider someone else's situation. Now, let me rename these, and I'll just kind of go down my list, look at my notes here for a moment, but step out, get out, pass out, go out, look out, and reach out. Now, if you're dealing with depression to such an extent that you may need to see a doctor, I'm telling you right now, go do that. And if you want an easier way to do that than trying to schedule an appointment with a stranger, than trying to schedule an appointment with some psychologist or psychiatrist, I would encourage you, tell your transplant team first. Those people are probably people you deal with on a regular basis, you're familiar with. Go tell them. And if they do like mine did, when I finally said, hey, you know what, I've had all these symptoms and signs and I think I might be depressed. You know what they said? They said, hey, you may be. As a matter of fact, they said, we've got a lot of patients that are like you. And we were expecting this. This is a part of the deal. And so they went ahead and said, let's try a medication or two. Let's try some of these techniques, such as the things I've discussed, although I put a little fancier, memorable terms with them. But try some of these things, see if it helps. And if it doesn't, we'll refer you to someone else. We'll help, let someone else help you, like a psychologist. I didn't go that far, maybe didn't need to go that far. They went ahead and helped me. So I encourage you, check with your transplant team to begin with. Admit what you're dealing with, if you are dealing with it, and also try these tactics. But, there are those among us who we're not going to get past this. Depression is not anything to be taken lightly. So, get the help that you need and accept that help. Reach out for it and accept that help. And please, please, please don't be ashamed. Now, if this has helped you in any way, how about go ahead and like, subscribe, and share this program. And hey, if this video has encouraged you to own up to your issues, if you have them, I'd like to hear about it. You can put it in the comments below here. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter. You don't have to tell me about it for that matter, but I'd like to hear about it. It would be encouraging to me as well as others if we can get the comments below this video particularly to going, kind of have to build a community of people who are saying, hey, I deal with this, and here's how I deal with it. And then maybe some of these practical things would help you in your life too. But again, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, stay stronger, friends.